Thank you. Thank you, Phelan. So, good time of day to you, wherever you are. I welcome you to the session, Uncommon Bodies, Playing or Representing, Problems of Race Assumptions in Virtual Worlds. My name is Deanya Schempp, and I'm a communications coach in Germany after 20 years of teaching rhetoric and writing in U.S. universities. The focus of my work is on how people use language to create, understand, negotiate, and explain reality. I'd like to introduce you now to my invited co-speaker, Ivory Snow. Ivory is a content creator that focuses on role-playing and exploring virtual worlds under the handle of Ivory Snow Plays. You can find her on about every media platform, but I found her on YouTube, where her channel is highly addictive. Ivory, thanks for coming. Do you have anything you'd like to say, or do you want to check your voice at this point?
Hello, is everyone able to hear me?
Sounds good.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm sorry, I was still away from my keyboard getting hydrated really quick, but thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
We're thrilled that you're here, so honestly. If there's anyone else in the audience or in YouTube chat who is invited to speak in this session or respond, please say hello now. In the meantime, I'd like to introduce Olive Tree Lighthouse. She'll be facilitating things today if you have questions or need help. If she messages you, please respond to her, as it would be something important. There's Tom Belstorff. That is Dr. Tom Belstorff, who is our esteemed keynote. And he is an anthropologist at University of California, Irvine. They are an anthropologist based at University of California, Irvine. I can't possibly do a better introduction for them than the one that was given at their keynote on Thursday. So please tune into that keynote. Tom's done amazing, amazing things, and really great introduction there. So I'd like to set the stage for our presentation today on race assumptions of representation in virtual worlds. As an educator and coach, I'm always happy to suggest Second Life as a fairly safe space where students and clients can work out personal issues. The experience of making rhetorical choices of shape, skin, eyes, hair, and all the available mesh body parts can be a sort of coming-of-age story for a new user. Finding role play and joining communities then helps them to refine or recreate those looks. I personally have created more than 30 separate accounts, not just avatars, each one experimenting with a different part of myself. Let me stop here for a minute and talk about how people have different parts of themselves, and yet they are still whole people. And no, I'm not saying that we're all multiple personalities. I'm going to use the word part today with that capital letter in the same way as it's used in internal family systems therapy and psychology. This is IFS. IFS assumes that all people are collections of parts. These parts have been created at different points of a person's life in response to all kinds of circumstances. For instance, I might have formed a part based on what my Uncle Frank said to me when I was 5. "You're an ugly kid." Then later, something my aunt said created another little part of me. You'd be so pretty if you lost some weight. As I grew up, I wanted to lose weight, but I was never successful. Part of me may be worried that if I did, I'd be really ugly. One way I worked to integrate my parts is by using Second Life. My first alt was a 9-year-old kid named Emmy. I made her her own account, so she had no sexy or naughty bits or clothes in her inventory. She was the account I logged into to feel safe. Emmy, to this day, runs around poking people with her wooden sword, wearing a towel cape, cardboard crown, and ballet tutu. Her best friend, to those of you who remember and want to hear his name again, was Stone Semyorka. He was a truly wonderful person, and he helped many people here, I'm sure. He made a tree house for Emmy on his land, and I started figuring out that no kid is ugly, and if they're fat, it's not their fault. I realized that those caretaker grown-ups around me as a kid were not taking good care of me. I realized that I could still accept and love those family members as people, while recognizing that their abilities to rear a child were really limited. I accomplished an integration of my parts with the help of SL. As a teacher of critical race theory, I sometimes use avatars in an attempt to practice anti-racism in Second Life. In one community at the end of Trump's term, I role-played a black female police officer who roller skates her beat in a sleepy little college town. By bringing an avatar of color into a white role-play area with my Black Police Lives Matter sign in my apartment, I wanted to shake up some expectations. But there are critics who would say I was doing blackface by doing performative race. By trying to play out parts of myself that often resist white female identification, I risk triggering someone else's experiences of lived race. And I watch YouTube. All of my favorite Second Life streamers write cultural appropriation. All of my Second Life streamers, all women, seem to have avatars that represent their real-life bodies. YouTuber Imuna Zamani, in her series called Being Black in Second Life, discusses colorism and her discomfort playing a character of another race, specifically Chinese. She says that she personally would feel it as disrespectful of another's race to wear a skin color that was not her own. To wear a different skin from one's own RL color can also be felt as disrespectful to oneself, as having no pride in one's own appearance. I want to suggest today that my felt freedom to role play as other human races in Second Life may come from different sources, but at least one of them is, let me say it out loud, white privilege. Admitting that I have white privilege is not a problem for me. I've lived with it my whole life, coming from rural North Carolina. My divorced mother and I shared a home with my college-educated grandparents who taught me how to read when I was 4. Told me that the only reason to go to school was to learn how to be around people who are not like me. That's some great grandparents, right? Very privileged. Until I was 9, all of our closest neighbors were black. We lived out on a country farm. I saw how my friends and I were treated differently, represented differently on TV, and had different friend groups once we got on the bus for school. What worries me is when white privilege doesn't see itself. And I want to suggest here today that privilege to role-play race might be an extension of white privilege in Second Life. It may not be something that we are all free to do, given the different parts we all have and need to have in order to find our identities here in a virtual world. What makes it even worse is if we assume everyone has an equal privilege to role-play race. Then we might be more critically harsh with avatars than we would be with people in real life. We might do and say some really dumb things to others, not realizing how strongly connected they feel to their chosen representations. We might be trying to offer help where no help is desired. Or we might read someone's look to our friends or our YouTube audience without recognizing the cultural alliances and community standards that other people share outside of our communities. And that's the kernel of why we're here today, to think and talk about the ways we have played and think about playing race in Second Life, to consider how others might feel differently, and to consider the consequences of things we say or do to others when they don't share our views, bodies, looks, or parts. So I'd like us to talk today from the perspective that we are all made up of parts. In this way, we can understand racism in our words as being parts of ourselves that have not yet been integrated into our whole self. To do that, we need to think about when, where, and how these parts got created in the first place. Working with clients in my Writing to Heal sessions, I developed a way to help them think about the voices and attitudes they've come into contact with across their lives. I call it the simple model. As I go over the model now, I'd like us to use it to think for ourselves about when, how, and from whom racist attitudes, words, and actions have touched our lives, and how they might still be present in some of our parts. So, in the simple model, first, we hear the voices of ourselves. No matter what we call these parts, our inner child or inner critic has been charged with sabotaging our successes and relationships. So the S in simple stands for what we hear from ourselves. Second are the experiences we had with our intimate connections, our family members, partners, caregivers, and caretakers. If we had intimate connections that said one thing behind the door to us, then opened the door to everyone else and said something different, some part of us noticed that. This category is good for remembering the secret things people said and did to us when the doors were closed. Many whites were brought up not to talk about race, for example, in the way that rich people are taught not to talk about money. The M in simple stands for meets. These are the larger group alliances through which your intimates meet the world. Neighbors, churches, schools, and work environments as examples. Encounters with these audiences can make us feel that ourselves or the intimate lives we have are not normal or approved by others. Many people develop parts that hate themselves or who they are because of things they hear or heard from meets. P is for policies. Policies are the rules we make and follow with others. We may think of policies like those in homeowner associations, political organizations, and workplaces where we form diverse committees in order to recognize differences and keep legislation at bay. But we also live under policies of who and what is represented in culture, even of who is allowed to exist freely in public, doing what work without community critique. For a long time, it was believed that white people would not watch television shows that focused on Black characters. The Cosby Show was rejected by every national network because TV executives said that a Black doctor married to a Black lawyer was not believable. It's hard to imagine these days, right? They would have that kind of response. Policies can be responsible for those parts of ourselves that hold us back. Even when the people making the policy don't say it out loud, policies can reinforce the traumas that meets and intimates have said out loud or hinted at. No one on TV looks like you or wears that kind of thing. That woman in church was right. Finally, L is for law, legal and legislation. We live under laws that were created before our time, yet control our personal lives. The ways that we identify within and outside of actual laws that could send us to prison or heavily fine us are important to the parts we have. For instance, when we want to speed up in our cars on the way home, or smoke a marijuana cigarette with a friend. Using the simple model, we can objectively see where our parts may have come from. We can then ask ourselves, is that part representative of all of me now? Or is that part something I used to feel, something I never questioned that my father said, or something I believed because I witnessed something once? So we have a way today to objectively discuss the parts we hear, we feel, or we have heard or felt in the past. We also have a way to see with each other that every one of us is more than one part. Maybe I don't have to be so triggered when I hear one of your parts say something I don't like, or act in a way that I don't understand. I can recognize that maybe even you yourself don't completely agree with the words that one of your parts is saying out loud. How cool is that? So, with that as a framework, I would now like to ask Ivory Snow to speak about her own opinions, experience, and thoughts from her perspectives about representations of race in Second Life. Ivory, have the floor.
Hello everyone, my name is Ivory Snow, and I first want to say again, thank you for having me here. The avatar you see before you today is a tall, curvy Black woman with a lighter complexion. Over the years, I've had many avatars that all portray a Black woman. And I have experimented with different body shapes, skin tones, and hair texture since I first started on Second Life in 2009. That was some time ago. I find these avatars the easiest to embody and understand because when I log out of Second Life for the day, I am still a Black woman. My Blackness is a part of me that I proudly carry in real life and in Second Life. I personally have never role-played as any race outside of my own, ever. It just does not appeal to me. If I want to know what it's like to experience life from a different point of view, then I just seek out firsthand accounts because putting on different skin, shape, hair type, etc. in a virtual world will never fully give me the insight into what it's truly like to have that experience. I personally take no issue with people wanting to play a race that is not theirs. However, it is essential to acknowledge the fine line between appropriation and appreciation. I believe that the reason most people fear playing something outside of who they are comes from not wanting to be associated with what most people do when they create a character that looks different than them. It gets offensive, and that is something that is not exclusive to Second Life. A few hours in VR chat rooms or watching a couple of GTA RP streams will tell you that it's very common for people to play a different race or body type or a different ability, in a very gross, offensive way. And to them, it's not racist because, well, it's online or they don't see color. That's the way they choose to justify it. If you are building a character and basing that entire being on the color of their skin, you're crossing the line there. If no parts of you were cultivated in, I'm going to use Black culture because that's my culture, then where are you getting your material to play this character from? You are playing a caricature of what you assume it is like to be a person of color. I do wonder what part of you thinks that's okay. What part of you thinks it's funny to put on an avatar of color and mock our features, cultures, languages, dialects, and freely say slurs on the safety of the internet. I personally started Second Life at a very young age, maybe a little bit too young. I was 16 and I played through college before going on a hiatus to do adulting, or what is also known as working full-time and having to pay bills. I learned in my early days that some people cling to this excuse that it's just Second Life when you address any gross behavior. Back in the day, I had a Second Life sister, and we both played on youth avatars because I was a teen in real life. Though I had good times with the sister, there were often major red flags that made everyone in my roleplay family, mostly made of Black people, in real life role-playing on Black avatars, uncomfortable. The things she would say, her overuse of the N-word, her butchered AAVE, it all came across as very strange and inauthentic. I knew something was off about her, and I was, yes, African American vernacular English, something you can look into. Yeah, for sure. She went from presenting herself as a youth avatar that happened to be Black to a walking stereotype of Blackness that you would see in a predominantly white vintage sitcom. Nobody in my community acts like that, so it was a little bit off-putting. We would later find out that it was a middle-aged white woman role-playing my sister. Her only response was, well, it's just SL. Everyone does that. You can be offensive as you want, and it's okay because, well, it's just Second Life. If you call, in my experience, if you call any privileged person out, I bet you 10 lindens that will be the response that you get. It is as if Second Life is a playground where people can explore these parts of themselves that are frowned upon in our everyday society. There's no need for accountability, and to me, that outlook is just very delusional, so old and so very tired. This type of behavior is not even welcome in the Second Life community if you just read their community standards. It should not matter if you see Second Life as a virtual world, a game, something that's just role play, or a huge chat room with an avatar that is an extension of you. You are still accountable for the things that you do and say and how they affect other people. People in Second Life have the right to use the platform to present themselves the way they see fit. The same way you have the right to present the life you want to the outside world in your real life. What do you gain when you mock someone about their avatar's figure, skin color, or species? And I use these examples I want to add because these are all things that I have personally been mocked about in my Second Life experience throughout the years. Why does that bother you? To me, you have to live a pretty bland life if you spend your virtual one berating people for how they choose to present in a virtual world. If you feel the need to do that, you should probably just log off, because I believe that everyone has the right to present the way that they want to in Second Life without being judged for it. I do want to thank you for your time and for hearing me out today. I do want to turn things back over to my co-host at this time.
Ivory, I think the things that you said are very interesting. Perspectives. I think that I'm just going to add a couple of words here without typing.
Okay.
Because I don't think we have any hearing impaired people in the audience, and it will be captured on YouTube. Okay. So, to me, I think one part of me says, oh, I think I'm hearing back from you. Could you maybe hit your microphone off?
Oh, I do apologize. I'm over here drinking water. I'm in Arizona and it's a little bit dry here today, so I'm a little dehydrated.
You don't get points for that if you drink it in real life. We do? Okay. Let's see. Okay. So, one part of me, okay, I'm getting information that we do have hearing impaired people in the audience, so I will try to type as quickly as I can. One part of me would respond that SL is different because you can mute or block people here, unlike real life. And so I would add that as just a factor that makes SL a little different. So do we have any audience parts that would like to speak? Sure, Clockwork, thank you. Oh, interesting. So Nia says it would be significant to block if you knew who you were really blocking. Nia says, I appreciate Ivory's perspective. I'm an African female and the misrepresentation of one's culture is insensitive. Evangeleva says, I think it brings up the issue of what we want Second Life to be. For me, it's about learning who I It's about, I'm sorry, Clockwork, I'll let you do that now. Clockwork is doing the text chat for me now. For me, I was resisting whiteness. It's not about being something else as much as it's about not seeing myself as white. And I have played animals. I have played other kinds of avatars. Most of my best friends in real life have been black females. And so I don't play black females as much as I play myself, but I don't usually have a white skin on like in Home Street. My avatar in Home Street is a black female. Just because I don't want to see my white female self walking around. Home Street is another game like Animal Crossing. So I would wonder, Ivory, would you like to respond to, I mean, I understand that appropriation is appropriation. I'm not arguing about wanting to have, you know, for me, it's an extension of white privilege that I feel like I need to be able to reject my whiteness.
For me, Second Life has always been about shared experience. I have met so many people that I would have never met, you know, in the real world. People from different cultural backgrounds, and I personally would never want to make anyone feel offended. I would never want to be insensitive. So I would just expect that from others as well. And I feel like Second Life, that's what it should be. That's what Linden Lab wants Second Life to be, you know, a space where people can have mutual respect for each other and enjoy this virtual space. And I think part of that is just having that accountability and acknowledging that privilege. And I do apologize if I spoke a little bit fast there, Spinell.
Alita says, Deanya, I play a white avatar for the same but opposite. You mean that you reject your real life race? So Alita is saying that, yeah, as a rejection of maybe real life self, or we can talk about playing on the borderlands. But that, again, I feel is white privilege.
I was in a session earlier today, and one of the things that they wanted us to consider is the marketing of Second Life. And I am an educator. I work in a K-12 environment. One of the things that prohibits me from using SL in my teaching environment is the personifications and the freedom that people have in expressing themselves any kind of way in Second Life that may be deviant or that may be out of order, because there's a freedom that exists within this environment that is more dangerous to me than in the real world, because you don't know who you're exposing to whatever it is that you think is normal, and it may not be.
That's a really good point, and I think we don't really know who people are until we spend some time with them. As Ivory was saying, she accepted a person as her sister and then found out that her sister was not, she didn't know her own sister. And that to me seems, if I were going to enter any kind of role play like that, number one, I can't imagine role playing a Black child, because I don't have that part. I don't reject myself as a child, so it's an interesting situation. Do we have any other comments? Max Chatmore says, my first encounter with racist behavior was one day when I had been trading clothes with my brother and was wearing one of his shirts that had bright stripes on it. My mother said to me, Mary Ann, why are you wearing that shirt? You look just like an N-word. This was puzzling to me for two reasons. First, it was my brother's shirt. Second, I had never heard my mother say anything like that before. My mother never said anything like that again and was actually active in the civil rights movement. I never asked her about that comment later, and I wish I had. I'm sorry, Max, I didn't read all of that before I typed my next thing in, but that's very interesting. There's a part, a part of your mother, some part was buried there. So we have Dr. Tom Belsdorf is here as an invited respondent, and he does a lot of work about embodying avatar. So Tom, thanks for coming. What does our respondent have to say?
Now, is it working now? I see green lines. Oh, good. I will try to type too. This was great. Thanks. I can just add a couple ideas. This is such an important topic. I actually have a PhD student that I'm working with. His name is Akil Fletcher, who is just finishing a PhD about Black gamers in Final Fantasy and League of Legends, studying Black gamer culture. So it's something that I've been talking about with him a lot, and also in my own research. So just sort of a couple things that I noticed from everyone's comments. One is the role of voice, and Akil is finding this as well, that we talk about the body, but so often when negative stuff is happening, it's about people using the N word, about noticing someone not speaking African American vernacular English or other kinds of things. The role of language in embodiment, that bodies have voices, that the body has a voice, and just that role of voice and how that works for the hearing impaired, right? And although that can include text, So it's not just specific to voice, because it's also about sort of social action, right? It's not just about the body, but what people are doing. There's actually a study that Mia Consalvo did with some colleagues showing how you could tell if someone who was male who was using a female avatar, people were often able to identify that by things like how they jump and things like how they move, right? And sort of that body sort of also move. So that's interesting. The two other quick points I'll mention, and one is, ideas about, no, Beth, that was, I think it was World of Warcraft they were looking at. But one is these questions of play and real, and from my keynote, the grid, if you remember that grid that I showed about how the virtual worlds are real. If you study German here, you can go to Berlin and talk to someone. We're learning real things right now. And also, not everything physical is real, right? That's why we have things like Hollywood, right? And play acting. And it's interesting that many of these issues also show up, for instance, in theater and movies, right? Those kinds of questions, like The Cosby Show, right? That is part of that. So, right, not everything physical is real is what I was trying to say. And that so often, oppressive behavior, I'll just call it that, whether it's racist or sexist or whatever in these spaces, is based on the idea that it's just a game, as if a game isn't a place to be, inclusive anyway. But that's so often used as an excuse. It has been used for years. And there's something very interesting about this sort of, negative use of the idea of play, that it doesn't have consequences. And therefore, oh God, I'm typing badly. Therefore, that's fine to do. And the last point I would just make, which several people already brought up, for especially around research, is what is similar and different around this, around different across different sort of categories of identity and community, right? Different identities, communities. Gentle, who's here right now, or Ice Guy, could very much talk about the percentage of people who, try to get involved with virtual ability who are not disabled. And, the question of so I'll just put in the type, ask virtual ability, and you all will know what that means. But I know that's an issue where, to be in a wheelchair or an amputee, this could be a way. People do that in the physical world, right? To use a wheelchair for a day, to just see what it's like in their city to get around. And so, it's interesting how that will show up. And then obviously around gender or around sexuality. And it's clear that the answer is, somewhere in between, right? It's clear that there are some things that are broadly shared, and there are some things that are very specific. This also includes age as well, right? Being an old person or a young person, older people, I've known people in their 70s or 80s who appear as someone in their 20s, right? Or the other way around. And what is similar or different is a really interesting question to think about, what's common and what's distinct around these, because unfortunately with all of these domains, there are inequalities out there, online and offline. So it's just a couple of thoughts. Thank you so much. Sorry about my bad typing.
I want to get a couple of the comments in here. Thanks, Tom. That's really very true. And what you say about wheelchairs is what Ivory was saying, I think, also about Blackness or about Native American race. It's not enough to be in the body for a day. or a wheelchair, it doesn't teach you. Right. Identity tourism is what Jaden says. And I wanted to say what Jenel said, using a wheelchair for a day as accessibility awareness doesn't really help. So these are some of the comments. Beth says people in Second Life tend to be immersive, disassociative, or augmentative. And she talks about Pamela Cliff's work. Pamela did Roadside Philosophers for Here. That's what we were trying to say earlier. Well, I think this is some... Ice Sky says, my avatar is me, whatever form I choose to take on. I express me in a way I can't do in real life. So I'd like to thank Tom for coming. Tom, do you want to talk any about your latest work and where to find it? What's going on for you?
Oh, I'm fine. I already talked so much in the keynote, but I'm going to be around in Second Life, and this is such an important place, and these are such important topics. So stay in touch. Feel free to friend me. Shoot me an email anytime.
Beth, is there something specific in chat that you wanted? Let's see. Oh, I see a couple things now. Max Chatmore says, I've noticed that my students usually choose avatars that are consistent with their real appearance, except if they decide to be vampires or werewolves. I think there's something very much more about real life representation within a known group, public face is important if people really know who we are. Lynn says a tiny friend lamented on Facebook that when playing Animal Crossing, she cannot choose to be an animal herself. That's right. That seems wrong, yeah. Ivory, are you back in? Would you like to have a few words?
Yes. I did, again, want to just appreciate everyone for this discussion today. There were some very great perspectives. Also, I did, trying to type and talk, I did want to touch on representation. And I believe you and I spoke about this briefly yesterday. In Second Life and other virtual spaces in different gaming communities, oftentimes our representation kind of comes off as an afterthought. You will get on different games where there might be one afro hair, and I'm just having a terrible time typing and talking. I do apologize. There might be one afro hair, or you go to Second Life and you go to a big shopping event, and maybe one of the ads has a person that is black, or brown, person of color. So I do think that the reason why people choose to wear, an avatar that represents them, especially if they're a person of color, is because we have to work 10 times as hard to find ways to be represented in these spaces. And my experience as a light-skinned Black woman is actually a lot different than a woman that would be of a darker complexion, because not many people create skins that are like that. Or skin creators that make these types of skins, they do not get the same opportunities as other skin creators to promote their business in different events and sales and things like that. So I think when we wear avatars that represent us and real life, it's just an extension of our pride and who we are, because we have to fight so hard and search so long for ways to be represented. And thank you for typing that out.
I just wanted to add something you had said to me yesterday. Ivory says that there is racism in the major sales, that the creators are not allowed to sell their products.
More so that they're not included in these spaces. So it could be a creator that's just as talented as, the next person. It's just maybe their aesthetic is a bit too, and I'm using air quotes on this, ethnic. Maybe their ads, the characters that they use in their vendor, maybe they're too shapely or, too dark skinned, and it just doesn't fit the aesthetic. So oftentimes creators of color are not included in these spaces. And there's a lot of complexities to that, having to align yourself to have, what would be a successful business that non-creator of color would never experience that. So there is a lot that, we have to deal with in order to be represented.
Okay, well, deep topic. Olive says we are out of time. I thank everyone for coming. The next session here at the Hearth will not start until 2, and it will be Virtual Worlds as a Tool for Overcoming Perfectionism with Rachel Wolf. So you're welcome to hang out here and chat or continue this dialogue less formally if you like. Thank you to the YouTube streamers and everyone watching. I'm Deanya Lattimore Schempp. I appreciate you all coming, sharing your precious conference time with us here today. Thank you, thank you. Are we still live? Great conversation, great comments.
I agree.
I think we are. I'm watching the channel, and we're still live.
Off now, yes.